Hey everyone, welcome to a new installment of the Filmographers Go to the Movies. Now, normally on our podcast, The Filmographers, Keir and I discuss an entire director's career, one movie at a time. Currently, we're in the middle of our first season where we're looking at all of Steven Soderbergh's movies. We just released our this week's episode on The Informant, and we're moving forward through there. But today, in a very special episode where we go to the movies and see something that's just been released in theaters, and this has really just been released in the theaters, we are going to discuss today, Megalopolis. I'm Michael Moreci.
And I'm Keir Graff, still a little bit dazed from the experience of watching Megalopolis.
Yeah, I mean, I saw it on IMAX, Keir, so I still feel like it's part of me.
Oh man, yeah, there's no escape from that giant screen.
No, no. So let's jump in. I'm going to give some context because I actually I know quite a bit about this movie because I've read a lot about it, as many people have, but I also, and I'm going to show this, but we'll also say what it is. I just finished this book. It's The Path to Paradise. Sam Wasson wrote it. It's the Francis Ford Coppola story. And I love Sam Wasson. He also wrote the book on Chinatown, which is fantastic. He's one of the best film journalists that we have. And he wrote this book on Coppola, and there's quite a bit of Megalopolis in it. And so for those who don't know, Megalopolis, Coppola's been working on this basically for like 40 years developing this thing, and boy, does it show. But we'll get to that in a moment. He's been working on this for 40 years, writing it. He's had different iterations. He's done table reads of it with actors. When I went to IMAX, there was a Q&A beforehand, a live Q&A taking place in New York. And it was Coppola, Spike Lee, and Robert De Niro. And De Niro told a story about how he did a table read of this many, many years ago, like in the 80s or 90s, maybe. Point is, this is Coppola's passion project. He put his money where his mouth is, like truly, which is admirable, spending, devoting $90 million.
Throwing away.
So, yeah. Devoting, we're going to say, $90 million of his own money. He had sold his stake, his wine company. He had just merged with another wine company, a very lucrative deal. He ended up selling his stake, which worth however much money, which is worth however much he's worth. And we'll talk a little bit about like how I can bring this up, how he has ebbed and flowed in like his financial success of being like very, very wealthy from Apocalypse Now and then losing it all and getting, like this happens a lot with him. But he put up $90 million of his own money to say, I'm making my passion project. I'm doing it. I'm doing it now. I'm doing it my way. And at long last, a movie that's been fabled more than really executed until now, we have Megalopolis. So, Keir, what do you got? Where do we even start?
Yeah, where do you even start? I went to see it with my wife Mariah last night, and
you took someone with you?
Yeah, I needed the emotional support.
Wow, I think the movie police are going to come for you.
Well, and also, had we watched it at home, were that possible, I know she would have just, left. So, it's important, I think, when you're watching a challenging movie to be in a theater where it's a really big deal to get up and walk out, like you really have to experience the whole thing. But yeah, we were talking about it a ton afterwards as the credits rolled and then again in the car. But at the same time, I kept feeling like, this thing is such a hot mess that I struggle with even making sense of it, or just where do you even start? It felt to me, I think one of my biggest takeaways is it sort of felt like the 70s called and they want their dystopian grand vision back, because it felt like a film made by a guy who hadn't experienced the last several decades. And I know that he was trying really hard to comment on the last several decades, but it just, whether it's the setting of New Rome or the intertitles that are like carved in these like granite, placards, or the ponderous voiceover, or the heavy-handed allegory, it really felt like a film that a director 50 or 60 years ago would have made to try to get their big, heavy political point across. It was not nimble. It was not leaden. It was leaden. And it was the weirdest combination of all, in that it was didactic, but the thinking was very muddled. So it was like somebody shouting at you without a clear message.
Yeah, I mean, yes to all those things. I will say this, like, and I'm sure you agree. I love Coppola. I love his work. The conversation, Apocalypse Now, The Godfathers. As people know, if you can see over my shoulder, it's kind of hard to see the Creature from the Black Lagoon poster. I'm a huge fan of Universal monsters, and Coppola has made the best Dracula movie ever. Like his Winona Ryder, Keanu Reeves, no matter how silly those performances may be, that movie absolutely rules. I absolutely love it. I love Coppola, and I love that he made this movie. Look, as an artist, for him to buck up this money and put $90 million on the line to make it and make his uncompromising vision, I am truly, and I mean this sincerely, thrilled that he did it. It means so much to him. The problem is, I have no clue what this means to anyone else. Anyone, literally, and I have no idea. Like, it's all the things. Here's the problem I have with it. This is something I learned from the book that I mentioned, Wasson's book. Now, the Apocalypse Now, filming of Apocalypse Now, as you know, and everybody knows, it's been well chronicled that movie making it was absolute hell, a nightmare. They're in the jungle. They're doing drugs. It's a mess. It's over budget. It's unwieldy. Nobody has any idea what's going on from one day to the next. Like, Coppola is writing it and rewriting it and rewriting it every single day. Every single day, he's like, "This is what we're doing now,"
Yeah.
Like, and he's high and like it's like nuts. It's one of the most fascinating film stories in the history of film. You can get the documentary Heart of Darkness, which chronicles probably only a fraction of it. Like, it's bananas. It's a miracle that they came out of that jungle with a movie, let alone a masterpiece of a movie. And I feel like, from what I'm seeing from Megalopolis reports, and boy, have there been a lot of wacky reports from around the making of this movie and after the movie, and AI generated titles that aren't true, all sorts of, oh boy, have they fumbled so much. But I feel like there's a similar aesthetic at mine, where Coppola, it feels like he came into every day of filming like Apocalypse Now, being like, "This is what interests me today. We're going to talk about this thing, and this is I read this book overnight, and I'm filled with these ideas now, and these are the ideas we're going to do. And I read Marcus Aurelius today, and we're going to talk about this. And I read this idea on city planning last night, and tomorrow we're going to talk about this." It feels like he took that Gonzo Apocalypse Now approach, where Apocalypse Now, like I said, is an absolute miracle that something cogent came out, and applied that again. And this time it didn't work, because what came out is just not cogent, not coherent. I don't know. There's a lot of nice things that he says about it. You'll hear him talk about how, like, he believes in art and he believes in the creative spirit and all these wonderful things that Coppola says. And I love him for this. He's like your kindly grandfather who's like, just go make your art and live your life. And he believes in you so genuinely. And I don't see that in the movie. I don't know what is the movie supposed to be doing.
I mean, that filmmaking approach, and it's so interesting to think about, particularly in the middle of our season on Steven Soderbergh, who is like, talk about somebody who has a plan, executes the plan, is very focused. I was actually talking last night with my wife kind of about Coppola in the context of like Kubrick, and like kind of comparing their contrasting approach. But you could also substitute, I think, Soderbergh for Kubrick, even though Soderbergh can work a lot more loosely. But like somebody who's got a plan, who's got a blueprint, and sets out to execute it, I think, versus somebody who's much more like, let me open my chest and let me open myself to the world and this creative experience, and let's kind of see what happens. And you can luck your way into a great film like that. But given we all know so many people are involved, particularly a production that big, so many hundreds of people involved, so many tens of millions of dollars, that like it's really difficult to pull that off and get anything at the end of it. And there's just something like, I agree with you. Like, I wanted it to be good. And it's an event, how many films are an event? Like when a filmmaker comes out with that, you haven't seen anything from them for a while, comes out and makes a movie, it's an event. Like, it did feel like an event, even though I was anticipating a movie that wasn't going to be great, and it wasn't great. it was exciting to go see a Coppola film. And then what we got was that. And it's such a shame that he couldn't, if just a little bit of story editing, because like Apocalypse Now, you've got a boat going up the river to find Kurtz, right? Like you've got, it's like based on Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness. You've got a simple narrative that all this other crazy stuff can be happening along. But you've got a simple forward momentum and a simple destination in mind. And this is just like, I'm going to make big statements about city planning and government. And then there's like a Trump critique thrown in there. And sadly too, it really felt to me like the product of somebody who, I hate to say it, but just felt very out of touch with society because, I know he said it's a fable. And so a lot of it is allegorical, but the kind of political statements he was trying to make just felt so kind of wildly unrealistic. Like, this kind of Trump stand-in like bullies his way to the front of this protest and grabs the bullhorn and just says a couple of slogans and now everybody follows him. And it was just like, really, it just felt like kind of stock theater or community theater at times. And in fact, like one of the first big set piece scenes where they're looking at this plan for a city and oh my God, I just keep like picturing all these old actors that he brought in too. It's like all his old friends and comrades who must have been along this journey with him forever, like Dustin Hoffman. Like, oh my God, it's Dustin Hoffman, but I feel so bad for him being in this. And I won't even go into some of the kind of problematic actors that he recruited for this. But there's this long, prolonged scene when they're on this kind of creaking wooden rigging and they're declaiming lines. It feels like a play and not a particularly good play. And it felt so amateurish. It just felt like here's somebody who really mastered a lot of the finest techniques in filmmaking. And maybe he's learned more than we'll ever know, but it also feels like what's the phrase? He's forgotten more than we'll ever learn, but It feels like he's now forgotten much of what he learned.
Yeah, I mean, and I want to go back to your point, and that's absolutely true. The quoting was harsh, was rough. At one point, they started speaking Latin, and I'm just like, what is going on? But like, you bring up a great point, which is, I think, one of the core issues that we have here in this movie is that Heart of Darkness had a simple narrative, right? Like that, like you said, absolutely simple. We need to go from point A, we need to go to point B, and we need to kill this guy. Like, this is it, and there is no real narrative to Megalopolis. Yes, okay, you can call it a fable, you can do whatever you want. There's nothing to hang the ideas on. There is just even what's so ironic is that the Megalon itself, this discovery, this discovery of this mysterious, miraculous material that can build buildings and cast dogs, make a cast for dogs and cure Adam Driver's face. No explanation. It seemingly has no practical application, but every practical application, that's the title of the movie. Megalopolis is based on this material that Adam Driver found. We don't know how he found it, why he found it. It's something to do with his wife's, death, but never. And look, you don't need it clearly described, but they just kind of shrug its shoulders at it. That should be the story. He has this material that can further the human race, move us into the future, into progress. But that's really not important. There's just no attention given to it. So, okay. I
mean, there's a little bit, because at the very beginning, there's the old guard is saying steel and concrete is how we build. And he's saying, no, Megalon. But as you're right, then they just it just disappears. And on the one hand, it seems like he wants it to be this Shakespearean family drama where, I mean, he even has Adam Driver doing Hamlet's soliloquy, which is just kill me now. And then there's this whole thing where his love interest's father doesn't, tries everything to keep him from being with his true love, kind of so a little Romeo and Juliet, but there was no clear reason as to why they shouldn't be together other than it doesn't seem to like him. But then it's also this kind of New Rome. This all takes place in New Rome. So it's this big political thing where, that just felt so clumsy too, comparing a society to Rome, been done before. But then the conceit of like dressing everybody in these kind of quasi-Roman clothes, I mean, that was the thing that felt so like dated to me too. Just like, Shakespearean companies have been mixing up the costuming for decades and decades. It's not new.
No.
It made it feel like kind of like a 70s, post-apocalyptic film where everybody's wearing this kind of mixed up crazy clothes.
Right. And it's like, it's also like, and something that like, this is a minor point, like a quibble for me. I hate in-universe inconsistency. It's like, we're quoting Shakespeare and we're picking out places in New York and there's like real world stuff, but that also we're in New Rome. Like, is this the same world? Is it the future? Why do we call it New Rome? Like
Why
why
is
do
everybody driving vintage cars?
why yeah why I mean like it's just so again it's just another layer of like inconsistency of like what is the actual core of what's going on in this movie. And that's one of the biggest things, and I'm sure you'll have thoughts on this too. Like the thing that bugged me is that like for a movie, okay, let's call it a fable, whatever, let's say it's like in the future and for some reason New York is now called New Rome. Fine. Okay. Sure. Okay. But like you're saying you're really trying, and Francis has gone out and said how much this is a artistic statement, and it does reflect his artistry and his history. But like, and I hate to say this, it's so out of touch, like you said, but it's also it's really empty. The core is so empty. The ideas are so empty. Like there's just nothing really that has much value. Like, I mean, even the idea of the megalopolis, which is the point of the movie, it's like, like, what is he saying? It's like, it's like, well, if we just make art nice and we're all, we make these really impractical buildings, like things will be better. It's like, I guess I don't really know that that's actually a thing or a realistic statement, but it just has a very hollow core in every single way. I can forgive the plot to a degree. I can forgive the like historicism that doesn't really work. I can forgive the clumsy quoting, but like it's hard to forgive a movie that's supposed to be at of artistic statement, a philosophical artistic statement on like where the future can be, where we can go if we trust in art and trust in humanity, and all these things that I know Coppola believe that are really wonderful, but like presented in in the most hollow, inconsistent, empty way possible.
I mean, you said it so well. Like the movie's called Megalopolis, so that should be a clue as to what he's really going after. The Adam Driver character is a Robert Moses type person. Like Robert Moses, for people who don't know, was an architect who really shaped New York City in huge ways, including like slum clearance and like tearing things down and really reworking the city to make it more modern in a way that like destroyed a lot of the fabric of the city historically as well. And so I think there's a clear parallel between those two characters. And there's some, the movie starts with Driver's character tearing down a building without approval because he's clearing land for his grand new vision. And there's a couple of little moments in the film where kind of the common people, in their little flat caps or whatever, they look like the rabble, are complaining that he tore down their home and it's not right. And Coppola never engages with this question of like, is it okay or not? The movie ends with this amazing vision where like Central Park apparently is now like this phenomenal megalopolis made out of megalon, and people are gliding around on. It's funny, for a Trump critique, they have something that's awfully similar to a golden escalator. It's like a golden people mover. And then he never gets back to the central question of like, well, what happened to those people who were rendered homeless for a while? And now he just kind of comes back as like, well, now look at this beautiful place I built for you. And when Driver's character appears in this golden halo of light at the very end of the movie to deliver his final big soliloquy to hopefully make sense of all this and like get everybody on his side, his words, like the writing is so bad, it's so empty. You're expecting the rousing speech, and it's just like a nothing burger. It's just terrible. And it's so, I think you're really right that like it just comes back to like Coppola believed that he can show up to the set, surround himself with this creative people, get himself in a creative mindset, spend all this money, finally get my vision out, but he couldn't, like, a director's job is fundamentally to make lots and lots of decisions to simplify, simplify, simplify until people can understand what you're trying to do. And all he could do was complexify, complexify, complexify. And you say that three times in a mirror and Coppola will appear. Like it just it absolutely didn't work. He tried to put in the whole kitchen sink and he needed to take things away instead of adding stuff in. There's so much talent, like so many good actors in this that, like, in a different era, I think, these would have been career enders. I think everybody will be forgiven and everything will be blamed on Coppola. But, I felt bad for everybody on screen.
Yeah, I mean, and I want to go back to what you said because it's important to point out this thing though, because like the complexify
I'll
point
say it
that
three
you
times.
don't just once, but like this is Coppola's life though. I mean, like I don't, Keir, I don't know if you know this or people will know this, but like I learned this from the book. I've always known that he is a very like wild guy who's gonna like try anything, but like learning that from what I learned from the Wasson book is like he's wild with this sort of ambition. Like he bought a building in San Francisco and he started a newspaper press. He then, I mean, that all went under. Then he bought like an entire studio space. I mean, he was going to do Zoetrope out of there, and he did do Zoetrope out of there for a while. But he bought this entire studio space, and not just a studio space. Like he was also like going to make a school and reinvent education, like all of
Yeah.
education to be focused on the arts. And his son was like the head of it, and he hired like Gene Kelly because he couldn't get work, and another, oh God, who's the other American director who couldn't get work? I mean, he's this beautiful, beautiful heart and this
Yeah.
beautiful man, and it's so hard to like watch. It makes it hard to like watch this movie and see how he couldn't execute this because the vision is so big. The vision is so radical that I don't know how you put it into words. I don't know how. I mean, it's like changing the entire world, like is what nothing less than that. I don't
Yeah.
know how you squeeze that into 120, 130 minutes, but like this is what he has lived and has attempted to actually do. Now, the problem is that it has failed every time. Like the Zoetrope went bankrupt. He had to sell his land. He had to sell this. He had to sell that. The building went bad. The news press went bad. Like all this kind of stuff. And on one hand, you can be like reading the book it's like the movie. Reading this book, if you get a chance to, is so maddening because you're like, Francis, you have so much money. You have so much power. Just simplify what you're doing. Stop trying to change the entire globe and just
Yeah.
one step at a time. Let's just, what's actually achievable? Like, other than like, the other part of it is that it is maddening and frustrating. It's like, did you really think that you, a person with no no experience in like actual education administration,
Yeah.
have taught a day in your life? You thought you can just revamp all of education because you felt like it? Like, it's like, wow, the
The
hubris.
hubris is something. And that's what's enabled him to make some masterpieces, because you got to have that healthy ego. At some point the ego gets a little unhealthy, a little too much. And again, like, he seems, I haven't read as extensively about him as you have, but I've always had this impression of him as like this avuncular figure, big Italian dinners on his estate, like welcoming to everybody, likes to have creative people around him. Just seems like an exuberant, ebullient kind of person that you would love to be in his presence. That's what it seems to me. So I certainly don't have any, like negative thoughts about him, except for just the waste of resources is so painful. As you and I are guys who often have to work with very modest resources. When you just see that, you're just like, it's like he needs a chief of staff or a board of advisors or people who are just going to kind of let him be him, but kind of rein in the stupid stuff.
Yeah, excuse me. Yes, that's exactly it. And Megalopolis feels like an extension of all of these wonderful ambitions, but also, I'm sorry, grand failures. And that feels like it. The movie is like this like compression of like big ideas that with unfortunately no kind of practical place to go. And the movie, did you ever see? You remind me a lot of like Southland Tales. Did you ever see that movie with the Richard Kelly from like 2001 or two? I've
No.
mentioned it before. It's a movie that I I absolutely love. It's crazy and it's a mess, but it's this beautiful experiment that's like wild. And it's very similar. Megalopolis is very similar, except like Southland Tales, and I'm sorry, has tons of interesting things to say. And it's crazy and it's weird and it's taking these big swings and it like makes you follow it beginning to end. You track this big, bold vision,
Yeah.
and you get it. Whereas like I feel like Megalopolis is like just all over the place, like I do have a question for you though, like getting off of the core of that. Um, this movie cost at least $90 million to make. I don't know if there's other investors that Coppola had. Um, it looks terrible. Like why did this movie cost $100 million? I can't get the words out. Like it looks
Yeah.
very bad. This looks like, remember Myst? Remember the Myst PC game? It fucking looks like Myst. Like, why does this look so bad?
I'm not a gamer, so I haven't seen that game, but like I had the same thought too. It just looks terrible in many different ways. It manages to look bad in a lot of different ways. The lighting, the first half is often really overlit. The quality of the lighting is often very kind of like made for TV. The framing is disappointing to say the least. The quality of the effect. I mean, again, I think, he's like, well, it's a fable. So sometimes the visual effects are kind of intentionally unrealistic,
Mhm.
but then at other times they're trying to be very realistic. Like there's a scene where they're riding a scaffolding up to the top of a building and they're going past what looks like rear projection, like 1950s rear projection, because the building facade looks so fake and not there. And I can
Yeah.
only presume that was an intentional effect, but it just varies. And we talk about consistency and coherency, and it just feels like, if he had a art designer that was really, allowed to do something, they might have come up with a consistent look for the film. But it's all over the place. The effects were underwhelming, and $90 million. Yeah, I don't know. Soderbergh makes this movie for $45 million, and it looks better. I think that some of it is just his bad business sense, because one of the articles I read about the making of is like he wanted his family to all stay together, during the filming. And so instead of, renting accommodations, he bought and refurbished a motel near the sound stages or wherever. And like that just doesn't seem like good business. That just seems
No,
like a big ass waste of money.
no, it feels like if I had to guess, like again, reading the Wasson book, like he is a guy, like you said, the grand Italian dinners, hand in hand in that is a lot of indulgences, a
Yeah.
lot of
Yeah.
indulgences. So I would imagine, look, half the cast is related to him. Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
Hello,
I would
Talia
imagine,
Shire. Yeah.
yeah, I would imagine that like there is a lot of a tremendous amount of waste. And look, it's his money. He can do whatever he wants with it. But like what's on the screen is like, I mean, the Coliseum sequence, which for God's sakes went on for far too long, that had to cost a ton to do that
Oh yeah.
Coliseum sequence. It didn't look great, and it was completely pointless. Like I don't want to spoil too much, but where it led to this reveal about this female singer, where it led to was basically unwritten in the next scene. Like the consequence of like this thing happened with Adam Driver's character and this singer was
Yeah.
basically seen later. It was like, nah, it did
Doesn't
forgotten. Didn't.
matter.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that was the culmination of this very, very long Coliseum sequence. That, like I said, cost a ton. I have no doubt. The scene had really no value. It money. I
I mean,
don't.
there were some things about it that might have been interesting had the film been more focused in what it wanted to say.
Sure.
There's this pop singer who's a self-proclaimed 17-year-old virgin who's going to save herself for marriage, and she has these groupies who are like also taking the pledge of virginity. And like, as a commentary on society, that's not so far from the truth. I mean, there have been in America, there's been like the Promise Keepers movement. You can sort of see like, society is cyclical. People get more conservative, more liberal at different times. He could have built that into something interesting, but that whole thing, as you say, it just kind of goes away, and then isn't really ultimately relevant because that character doesn't really come back into the movie.
Yeah, and even if that is relevant, like, and it is, like, there is relevant to society. Like, I have no idea how that fits into this movie, like about building a mega's perfect city, like why that digression has anything to do with anything. I couldn't, I can live for another 100 years and I'll never understand
I mean,
why.
he starts out the movie with some scenes of nightclub decadence, which is like a movie cliche that I'm just so tired of. Like, oh, decadent nightclub scene, like check. And then we see poor Chloe Fineman from Saturday Night Live is one of the ones who's going to take the hit for this. But there's this group of like young decadent party goers, and I feel like he's trying to say like, yeah, we're a new Rome and everything's really decadent. And like, yeah, okay. I mean, we live in a current era of like economic inequality. The very rich are very rich. The rest of us, not so much. The lifestyles are hugely different. Like you could absolutely make a movie about that kind of, this new gilded age we're living through. And I apologize to listeners if they can hear the drilling in my wall. But yes, I mean, I think we are very much
Building Megalopolis over there.
building Megalopolis in the studio next to mine. But yeah, I think we are living in a new gilded age, and I think you could make a film about that. But again, that's not the film he really actually made if he was intending to make it. Again, too many ideas, none of them cohere. I mean, we could talk for hours about this, and I think we'd still kind of come up with nothing. Like the movie felt a lot longer than its running time, and by the end, I was kind of like, that weird way, like. Again, it's kind of interesting to sit in a movie theater and watch a bad movie. You can't pause it. You kind of get sucked into its world, and at some point, you can have a moment of kind of questioning yourself, where you're like, "Is this making a coherent point that I'm not getting, or whatever?"
Yes,
but no, it wasn't. And I studied it. I paid attention. I remained alert. It doesn't hold together.
yeah, and I've had usually we see these movies because we don't have early access, but like we see these movies and we go do the episode on it within like 24 hours. I saw this movie on Monday, so I've had a lot of time to think about it, and I've gained no clarity whatsoever in that time. Like, so I think if this were our audio episode, this is where we insert the clip of Skinner saying, "No, it's the children who are out of touch." But like. Yeah, I have not come around to it. I mean, maybe there is a 4-hour cut in our future. Could very well be. I have no idea. Like when it comes to the production of this movie, I can't even guess what was filmed, how it was filmed. I don't know. I don't even know what more would look like. But no, I don't think that like you or I or anybody else. Look, there's going to be people who are going to. Look. I think, like you said, it's an event, and if someone were to ask me to go see it, I would say. Absolutely. Go see it. It is crazy. It's singular. 2 hours as a film, as someone who anybody who loves cinema, yes, go see it. It's Coppola. You might enjoy it. I know there's people who are going to defend it because it's going to be more a defense of Coppola.
Yeah.
And that's a worthy defense because this is his passion project. He's one of our greatest filmmakers, and he's done it himself. All these great terms, there's going to be people who like love maximalist filmmaking, which is very much what this is. Like there is no holding back in Megalopolis. There are. So I still want to say, despite what you and I are saying, like, look, it's worth seeing just because it is. I'll give them this. It's an experience. I will say that. And Aubrey Plaza, go see it for that because.
Yeah, I think it's worth seeing.
She's the only one who knows what movie she's in, I think.
I think it's worth seeing as well. I can't recommend it, but I think it's worth seeing because, as we said, it's an event by a major filmmaker, and because it's a big swing. If it would have been just kind of like marginally bad or kind of lame or tepid or whatever, I would say no, don't see it. But there's something fascinating about a big swing and a big miss. I appreciate the fact that he went for it. I love the mad visionaries among us. He certainly is one. Society is richer for having these people in it. He didn't make a good movie. I suspect it's going to be gone from theaters. I don't know what the terms of the distributor are, but I suspect it will be gone from theaters very quickly. So if you are curious and you want to see it on the screen, which is how I think you should see it, go see it quickly because it's going to be gone.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard, and I think this is, I don't know how much I believe this, but I've heard it's like since it's in the age of ticket sale tracking, this movie it has the lowest pre-sales of any movie in the ticket tracking era. Which I don't know. I don't know if I believe that. I think, I went on Monday, like it was an early screening for
Yeah.
IMAX. It was like two theaters around me. It was actually like 40 minutes away from me that were showing it, and it was well attended. There's a lot of people there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I saw it in a multiplex in a pretty small theater. It was definitely not full, but we weren't the only people in there either. I think there were other people who were curious. It was I will say it was a bunch of middle-aged white dudes.
pretty much the same. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's it's a curiosity, like you say. It is definitely a curiosity. It's an experience. It's Coppola. Could very well be his last film from one of our greatest directors. So it's it's an interesting thing, and it is a bit of like a time relic, like you're saying. Like this feels like this should have been made in the 70s, but and now that it's 50 years past that, it feels like modernly antiquated, unfortunately.
Yeah. I think that's exactly right. Well, I know you have to take your kid to a movie, being a good
Yeah.
dad.
Wild
Uh,
Robot, which I'm assuming is going to be more coherent than Megalopolis. Maybe we'll just go see Megalopolis. Like, look, I know you're only 10.
I would love to get a 10-year-old's review of Megalopolis. Yeah, any rate. So maybe we should wrap it up there. I love these go to the movies episodes. Listeners, viewers, if you like them too, please let us know. Give us a like, subscribe to our channel, subscribe to our podcast. We're primarily an audio podcast, but occasionally we do these video episodes. It's very fun to do. I mean, who knows? Maybe we'll do more video in the future if people like it. But yeah, let us know. We will try to be doing more of these as time goes by. These quick reactions are a blast. I love watching a movie and having a great discussion about it. And I think we did have a good discussion.
I think so too. And we have lots of good discussions, as you're saying on our podcast. Like, yeah, you can find us, the Filmographers podcast, anywhere you find podcasts. We're there. We're available. We're, like I said, at the top of the show. We're in the middle of Steven Soderbergh's career. We've done Out of Sight. We've done The Limey, Aaron Brockovich, Bubble, The Underneath, King of the Hill, etc. We've done every movie in order, and we're going to keep going all the way till Soderbergh ends, which I don't know when that's going to happen because he's got two movies coming out next year, but we're going to keep going with Soderbergh. We love him. There's so much to talk about. So find us there, find your favorite Soderbergh. You can just jump in, listen to the Out of Sight episode and enjoy it, or whatever the case may be. But you can find us anywhere. And like Keir said, reviews, ratings, anything is very helpful, very appreciated. And that's about it. We're just happy to be able to keep doing this and talk about movies, and especially these fun little reaction videos.
And after you've subscribed to our YouTube channel or followed us on your podcast platform of choice, don't forget to check us out on Instagram at the Filmographers or on X at FilmographerPod. Send us an email if you want. If you don't like the whole public comment thing, send us an email. We're at thefilmographerspodcast@gmail.com. And finally, special thanks to our producer extraordinaire, Kevin Lau, Gompson, who composed and played our theme music on our podcast, and Cosmo Graff, who designed the Filmographer's logo. That's all from me.
Yeah, that's all for me too. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, and stick with us. We got some good stuff coming up. We got Contagion, Magic Mike. There's so many good Soderbergh movies still to come, and we're going to be here for all of them. So check them out. Check out your favorites, and we will see you next time at the movies.